uh, we have to ask the question, why? Why do people contemplate suicide? In a general sense, the answer is pretty simple. Some people are convinced they're better off dead than alive. This is a lie they believe, but why do they think this? Well, it's because they've lost hope in this life. The folks at the CDC say, and I quote, young people who feel hopeless about their future are more likely to engage in behaviors that put them at risk of HIV, STDs, and unintended pregnancy. Suicide risk measures here by increasing levels of suicide ideation plans and attempts not only places the life of the adolescent at risk, but is also a marker for experience with trauma and other mental health issues. Even the CDC is recognizing that with these increased in statistics is comes along, and part of the reason, the foundation for why people are contemplating suicide, why these numbers are skyrocketing, because there's a sense of hopelessness across the board. But we have to ask the question, and this is something I think the CDC can't ask: why are people losing hope? And I actually think the answer is pretty clear. As Christian influences fade in our culture, the suicide rates have skyrocketed. There's been a shift of ideas, and ideas have consequences. For one, we've been heavily influenced by the view that of naturalism, and this is the view that everything that exists is in the physical realm, and everything there is merely a product of a purely naturalistic process. And then this is naturalism. It's captured best in the words of Carl Sagan. If you guys remember Carl Sagan, he said the cosmos is all there is, or ever was, or ever will be. And if Sagan is right, and if naturalism is true, then so is Thomas Hobbes, who famously observed. And I love this quote, that he says that life is an unregulated state of nature, and then at its bottom, life is, Hobbes and Leviathan says, life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. You see, if naturalism is true, uh, our only hope is found in ourselves, and this is what we're seeing as people lean into like their sexuality and promiscuity and these things. They're looking for hope in these things, and they're falling far short. But not only that, as they go towards these desires, as they go towards these things like leaning into their LGBTQ plus or trans identities, all they're finding is more of themselves for hope. But more than that, they're finding the promises that these things make, they fall short. And then not only that, but they going directly against the ultimate and fundamental plan that does bring happiness and satisfaction. And what happens is our salvation ultimately comes from our own human effort, trying to generate meaning from more education, more power, more fame, or more money, or more sex. But what happens when we fail? Well, we have to quickly find ourselves pulling ourselves up by our own bootstraps. We have to lean into more money, more power, more fame, more sex, and we find ourselves in this cycle of disappointment with no end in sight, except for perhaps suicide. And why do you guys think hosts of notable celebrities and athletes take their own lives when they, in quotes, had it all? Because those who find themselves at the pinnacle of success, or at least worldly or earthly success, are still empty when they get there, and without hope. The clearest example in my mind, and I don't know if you guys remember Anthony Bourdain. He's a clear example of this, who died by suicide. He had it all, you know. And then ultimately he had it all, but by the world standards, but he was still without hope. And I think that's because his worldview, I don't know if he was an atheist per se, but his worldview and the worldview of many of us, even in the church, has been influenced by naturalism. And in the end, naturalism, it can't deliver on the promises it makes. And at bottom, it's a narcissistic view of reality, and it leaves its disciples empty and lost without hope, believing they're better off dead than alive. I think that this answer is clear. How do we answer the questions of meaning and purpose if everything that ever was or will be is just matter in motion? From where do we derive hope? The CDC discusses this prevalence of our youth expressing hopelessness. while at the same time we're just turning them back in on themselves from where the hopelessness derives, because they realize they don't measure up to the standards that the society has set for them. Even as we lower the standards in society, they still aren't measuring up because they're lost in themselves. And as I said just a minute ago, hope, if hope only comes from ourselves, we're doomed. And I want to be clear here. Just because we're Christians doesn't mean we're not vulnerable to the lies of the world. We are. Even Christians can lose hope, but often it's because we lose sight of where our hope comes from. Often we adopt naturalistic ideas. We become syncretistic in our understanding of what the Christian worldview is. We adopt these outside views and allow that to influence our current understanding of our reality, the true story of it, of reality. And sometimes this manifests itself in things like legalism, the idea that our relationship with God and ultimately our salvation depends on how well we perform. And any Christian who's constantly measuring himself by his performance will be constantly disappointed. And this is what I mean. This is a naturalistic point of view, having this standard that you have to reach in order to gain acceptance, whether it be by culture, society, or God. And on legalism basically, in the end, it leaves us, it's hopeless, because in the long run, we can never measure up. And day after day, we let God down. And when we tie our salvation to our performance, we lose sight of God's grace. Life gets unbearable because God becomes either this far off being who doesn't really care what happens to you, or even worse, it becomes this angry father just kind of like waiting for you to mess up. And that's why sometimes one of the reasons why the Christian loses hope. But the point is here that no one ever measures up. And this is why the world needs the gospel. The world needs the gospel. You want the solution to suicide. I'm not saying it's going to be the solution to all our earthly struggles, but if we want to instill hope on people, it's found in the person and work of Jesus Christ. None of us measure up. That's the reality of fallenness and the point of the gospel. The law is a teacher. It's good. It points us to our need for a rescue. And this rescue comes through the grace of God found in Jesus of Nazareth, and there alone. It doesn't come through our own efforts, whether you're a believer or not. We all have to live in the world that God made, regardless of whether you believe in him or not. So when we don't live according to the principles that God has set out, we bump into reality, and those bumps, they hurt. And oftentimes those bumps, they result in hopelessness, because we search for hopelessness where hopelessness isn't, where hope isn't. If we trust in our own efforts, there's no hope. You see, it's the psalmist. The psalmist says, if you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, O Lord, who could stand? And listen to this. This is amazing. He says, but there is forgiveness in God, right? For the one who trusts in Christ, God keeps no record of right and wrong. If he did, no one could stand. But there's hope for every single child of God, because the God is full of forgiveness. We've been rescued, and what God rescues, by the way, he rescues completely. And this is the truth that we have to lean on in times of hopelessness. And this is the truth that we need to be sharing with people in times of hopelessness. We are not ashamed of the gospel, because it's the power of God unto salvation, is what Paul says. You see, what the world wants us to place our hope in is meaningless. But it's that steady, unchanging relationship with the Redeemer God and the Son of Heaven. That's the only thing that isn't meaningless. Trusting Jesus Christ daily for our salvation and not relying on our own efforts. This is what brings ultimate hope.